Hey everybody, welcome back to Uncle Pookie's Barbecue. I'm Uncle Pookie, and I've had a few friends ask me a lot of times, and when we talk about doing barbecue and stuff, is, oh, I did a whole shoulder, I did a shoulder this week. And I know there's a lot of confusion. You go to your local grocery store, a lot of times they'll have just this here is a whole shoulder. It is the whole section of leg. You've got the Boston butt end here, and then right about in here is where they serve that shank in. They call it a picnic roast a lot of times. And sometimes I've gone into my local Kroger or whatnot, and they'll have just the Boston butt, or the top end of the shoulder, and it'll say a Boston butt shoulder roast, or like I said, the picnic end, they'll call it a picnic roast. So when people say, oh, I did a pork shoulder today, they're probably just talking about that upper portion, the Boston butt end. And then some people will see the picnic end and see that it's a picnic shank portion, or a shank picnic shoulder. I really just want to kind of take this film, this footage, to kind of go over what a whole shoulder is and how we're differentiating between a Boston butt and the picnic end of the pork shoulder, and what the difference is in the meat. Obviously you've got on the bottom end here, you've got this rind on it, so there's a big difference there. But you can see, I mean, when they pre-butcher this, they leave a lot of this rind on. But if you get a Boston butt, a lot of times you'll see, and this is kind of a good example, the meat stops here, so they take that rind off right to there, and all you have is this fat cap on the back. But again, I just kind of wanted to go over the differences between a whole shoulder and the Boston butt and the picnic, and how they come together, because a lot of times people that do know the difference may not really put the two pieces together to see a whole shoulder. So we're just going to cook this for backyard. I've got some friends that were wanting some pulled pork, and they said, well, can I get a butt from you? And I thought, well, I'll just take this minute to do some footage on a whole shoulder and do both. I am going to separate them, I believe, to show the difference, what you'll see when you get them from the store separated. But two, I'd kind of like to see what the difference is in the meat. A lot of people have told me in the past, like with the picnic and the couple of picnics, I don't cook a lot of the picnic part. I do more butts for competition and then for friends and family. But the picnic end, from my understanding, is more of the white meat. It's a little drier meat. It's not that it turns out dry, but it is a leaner portion of the. It's a working muscle, whereas the top is maybe not as much. I mean, you can just see from this side especially, you just got more concentrations of fat, and you've got more marbling through the meat on this end. Then when I open this up and get under this tag here, you're not going to see quite as much marbling through the meat. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut into it here, dig in, and see what we got, and see how good of a shoulder this is going to turn out to be anyway. And see how the process works. Again, it's one thing for me to put two pieces of meat together in a store and kind of say, oh yeah, I can see where that comes from, but it's even better when I can get the one piece of meat and see it in my own eyes that this is the way they come together. And the picnic is not, again, it's not as popular of a cut, so you don't see it in the store as often, but I mean, it's just as good of a piece of pork as the butt is. Again, it just may be that it's not as red of a meat. It's a little more the white meat when it's cooked. A lot of people like that, but there is a little bit of a difference in that. Again, this is the whole shoulder, and you can kind of tell right here there's a little bit of a, kind of hard to see if I'm getting the camera in on it, isn't it? You can see right here, this area here is a little more whiter meat than right here. So you do have it where when it's cooked, it's going to be a little bit different texture of meat here than it is over here. So we do have, I'm just going to do a little close up here. We've got some arteries and some veins and whatnot that we need to kind of cut out here a little bit. I'm going to trim this up. Again, this is not for competition, so I'm not I'm not going to do a heavy trim on this, but I do want to clean it up and get some of this trash off of it that's not going to be any good to eat. And a lot of this may cook off of it, but hey, we might as well go ahead and just clean it up and be done with it. So let me see if I can get this down. Quit looking at me and look at the meat a little bit more. And I'm also going to go over a little bit too about what I do before I season the meat as well. Let me just go ahead and start on this right here. I don't like a lot of trash. I've talked about this before. I like when my finished product is finished and I don't have to work real hard. When I'm getting ready to eat, I'm ready to eat. So I'd rather work a little bit on the front end here and get things cleaned up than I would on the back end with the finished product. And you kind of fill out here a little bit and see, I just don't want these veins and this little bit of fat that's in here. It's just going to cook away, but I'd rather just go ahead and get rid of it now if I can. Spin it around again here, kind of show you. And again, this is not anything that's real vital to cut off, but it's just cleaning it up now is easier. It just comes out a whole lot easier than it does later on when I'm trying to pull this meat. Now, this vein digs in pretty deep here. I'm going to work on a little bit other sections here and then come back to that. Now, like with any other meat, I always want to get as much of this silver skin and stuff off of it so that my seasonings will penetrate. I don't want to waste all this stuff, and even though that's going to cook off, I would rather get this seasoning I'm going to put on it to the meat on the front end than hoping that it's going to reach it in the back side on the end to cook here. Now again, you can kind of look and see there's a little piece of meat, but there's silver skin in behind it, and that little piece of meat just may come right off in the cooking process. And again, I'm going to get my money's worth on this meat, but again, some of this stuff is just not worth saving. If I can get in underneath it and just lose a little bit to get to the good meat and get seasoning all around it. Here we go too. Again, I can kind of come in underneath this meat, carve some of that skin and fat off, and that's just going to make good bark. A good thick layer of seasoning on it is going to trim it up real nice. Yeah, that's either part of a vein or a gland. We got to remember too, I mean, this butchering these animals, you've got membranes and different parts of the animal that just aren't necessarily made for eating. So we're going to cut some of this stuff out that I can get to and show you that it's all in the detail work right now. This work here is going to pay off dividends on my final product for sure. Just going to make it a better product. It's going to have more good bark on it if I'm cutting it down now. I'm going to do a little bit of incision work here. This vein is really kind of got my OCD flaring a little bit, and I don't like to again, I don't want to eat anything right down the road when I can cut it out now and make everything a little bit more better. So I'm going to dig in here a little bit. I don't normally like to do this, but again, that vein is just sitting there looking at me, staring at me, almost laughing at me. I ain't going to deal with that. Dig in here and cut it out. Now again, it goes way on down in between the meat sometimes. And again, all that's probably just going to cook on out. It's not like you're going to open up all this cooked meat and have a big old, piece of vein looking back at you, but it's still, anything I can dig out now is going to be a better end product. That's not too bad. I'm going to carve just a little bit of this. You have to bear with me a little bit too, because this meat is frozen and it's thawed, but it's still mighty cold. coming out of the refrigerator, and got my hands numb already. So let me just continue peeling some of this away. It's another part of that same vein right there. It is a little easier to cut onto while it's cold like this versus if it was already kind of getting to almost a room temperature. It's easier to cut on when it's a little more dense like this. So it may still have a little bit of frozen moisture there in the center of this piece, but right now it's easier to cut on this way. So most all of that off there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim this up today, and then I'm going to turn around and put it on the smoker tomorrow. So when I get done with this end here, this trimming, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, let the seasonings really soak into it. And see, like I said, now this rind goes way back. And it is a nice protective barrier from any kind of heat coming up from the bottom, but at the same time it's going to make my cook so much longer that I'm going to go ahead and just cut into this rind here, and we're going to get rid of it. I don't like cooking with the extra heavy fat cap on. You know, it does make for a good insulator. And there is some meat down below this fat cap on the butt end of it that is some really, really good stuff. I don't, we would call it bacon. It's technically not bacon, but it is so good. It's like bacon. And when it's down in between these layers of fat, it just stays flavored and moist and wonderful. So I'm not going to cut all this off. Sometimes I do if I see from the package that bacon is just a real thin strip and not much there. I may go ahead and cut it off, but right now I'm going to hold on. I'm going to trim a little light and see if I can't save some of that bacon, because I don't want to get rid of it. But again, if there ain't much in there, then it's not really worth the extra hour or two of cook time that it may take to get through this layer of fat and rind and all this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut as much of it off as I can without cutting into that bacon, and see what I can do. Yeah, so it's just a thick layer. You get under this rind, and the fat is softer, so it is going to render out fairly quickly. See, that thick stuff right there is just an insulator, which is nice, but it's also something that's going to take more time. We're going to keep on trimming into it, see how deep she goes. See when I get to if I can find that bacon end, I'm going to try to leave it on there. Now, you know, the competition guys, they'll get into this and they're going to wrap this rind up in oiled rags, or ways to keep that skin looking right but not get real dark and all that. Well, we're cooking at the house. We ain't too worried about making it show quality for competition judges or anything like that. I'm just looking to get some good pulled pork and do a little experiment. Like I said, see side by side the difference between that Boston butt meat that is real moist, real fat dense, and then this picnic end that may not be quite as marbled through there. Get some of this fat off, so again we can make some good bark. Now I'm going to leave this fat, because I am going to cook it fat side down. I'm going to turn around this way here real quick and take a look, see what we got. There's a shank bone. You can't really see it on camera right now, but there's a shank bone right there that runs under this rind. And if I can flip it back back around, it does. It meets up in here in this area. Like I said, you got your difference. There's your blade bone. There's your blade bone right there. So if I cut right in through here and can find that joint and separate them, I have the picnic end and the butt end right there. In reality, I think I said I was going to separate them, but I think I'm going to keep them together. It's pretty clear the difference here when I'm talking about this picnic end and this butt end. Anyone that's cooked a Boston butt a few times, you know about that blade bone. You know the end of the butt comes in right around here where that bone joins to this shank bone right here. That shank bone goes right in here, right along this stretch. So I'm going to leave them attached. What this is going to do, I'm going to leave this attached. It's going to make for a longer cook because it is one continuous piece of meat. It's going to take longer for the meat to penetrate to this point as it's whole, and longer for it to penetrate to the center of this section as a whole piece. Whereas if I cut this in half, it's only going this far, and if I'm going from here, it's only going from here to this section. So it's going to be a long cook, but I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it together and just see how everything comes together. Again, this is a whole shoulder. The Boston butt end, the picnic shank picnic end. And I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this whole for y'all and see. Again, it's all going to be pulled. We're not doing any competition stuff. I'm not going to work on this money muscle here. Which it actually has a pretty good looking money muscle. If I was doing an MBN contest, then we might have a pretty good little section here to roll back. You can trim some of this fat down to the muscle all the way and get to where you can make those slices out of that money muscle there. That's a pretty good piece. But again, this is for backyard, and this is an eating pig. This ain't a show pig. So I'm just going to take a little bit more of this fat off the top and this silver skin, this area here that I can trim back to make more of a bark section, so that when I start putting my seasonings on, it's really going to adhere to the meat and not have to cook past it. You wait for this silver skin, this fat to render. It's all going to be out of the way so the seasoning can sit there. And again, I'm going to season it now and let it sit in the refrigerator all evening. It's going to continue to thaw the rest of the way through, and then the salts and the spices are going to seep into this meat. You know, the outside layer anyway. It's of course it's not going to go real deep into the meat from the outside, but it is going to be good. The longer it sits in, it's going to creep its way into the meat here more and more. Go ahead and take care of this. I should be using that for sausage, but I got plans for some sausage coming up, so I'm not going to worry about some of that scrap stuff and everything there. But we've got a good looking base here, cleaned up, and again, this is for backyard use. So I'm going to start seasoning up here real quick, kind of explain what I'm going to do. One of the other things that a lot of folks will talk about, let me get this camera fixed up here a little bit. So ugly as I am, I'm going to get more into the scene here. Alright. A lot of people will debate whether or not to use a binder of some kind, whether it be olive oil or yellow mustard. I have used the yellow mustard, I have used oil, and it works fine. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It does help the spices adhere, the seasons adhere to the meat and not just run off. Two things. This has been frozen, so it's thawing out. It's already real tacky. So, and that's the ultimate point of any kind of binder is for the meat to be a little tacky. So when you start to apply your seasoning, it's going to adhere. It's not just going to sit there and then run off or bounce off. Another thing too is that we're not going to be putting this meat on here in just the next 30 minutes to an hour or anything like that. This is going to sit in the refrigerator overnight. So it's going to have plenty of time to really sit on the meat, soak into the meat as much as it can. My salt and pepper love is just your simple all-purpose seasoning: salt, pepper, garlic, and onion. And the salts itself is going to draw out some of the moisture in the meat on this outside layer, and that's going to open everything up to draw in some more of the flavors and the seasonings and the spices. On top of that layer, this is Alright, with technical difficulties, we are back. Let me put my gloves back on. Don't you love it when a plan comes together? What I was saying before the camera decided to die on me was that the binders, the olive oil, the peanut oil, the yellow mustard, all that is great. It does exactly what it's going to do. And there may be some scientific proof that the vinegar and the yellow mustard helps to break down the meat and tenderize it. I'm not debating any of that. But in this situation, because I'm going to leave it overnight in the refrigerator for all these seasonings to soak in as much as they can, I'm not going to use a binder. Again, this is not a competition. This is for home use. I can go back in the morning before I even light the smoker. I can go back and put another layer of seasoning and rub on this, and anything that may have knocked off, or moving it from the cutting board to the pan, maybe some of it gets knocked off. I can always put multiple layers on. You do want a thick layer of seasoning. That's one thing that I've learned over the years. Before, I would think, oh, well, I don't want to over season the meat. Well, you've got a big, thick mass of meat here. You're not going to over season. As much as I think I've ever put on something big like a butt, or in this case the whole shoulder, when I think I've over seasoned, I probably still haven't used enough. Again, I've never had a situation where I have been able to notice or say that I over seasoned something this thick and dense. Because again, that seasoning on the outside is going to create a bark or a crust. A lot of people love that. Now, there is a fine line between when it starts getting dark, whether it's caramelizing sugars and it's burnt, or if you put too much smoke in your smoker, and it gets in with that sugar and makes a bittery, burnt taste. I don't want to get to that point. But again, you're going to have to work really hard to ruin something like that. So anyway, the all-purpose seasoning again is the salt, pepper, garlic, onion. It's just a good base layer. I have all those seasonings in my barbecue seasoning as well. But putting this down in layers, it does make a difference. Again, I'm not here for the science end of it. But I have noticed when you put these different seasonings on in layers, it does make a difference in your final product. So what I'm going to do is just put a coat, even coat of this salt, pepper, garlic, onion, my salt, pepper love. Again, it's just a good all-purpose, a good blend of your basic seasonings. And I'm not going to coat this real heavy because, again, I do have salt in the barbecue seasoning. But again, this starting out layer, this initial layer does help to kind of start drawing the moisture out and getting pores open where it'll accept more flavor from the other seasons that come in on top of it. So it does make a little bit of a difference when you're layering flavors versus just piling them all on at one time. Now, some people say, oh, you waste your time seasoning the fat and all that. You know what? I'll take my chances. It ain't like it's going to cost a whole lot of money here. I'll probably put 15 cents worth of seasoning. Now, obviously, I'm not going to season this rind. This skin here is strictly a binder protecting this leaner meat that's in the inside on this picnic end. So I'm not going to waste my seasoning on that. And two, it literally is a skin. It's not going to take anything. But the fat layer, it may absorb just a little bit through some of that fat. It may accept some in the fat to help down the road in the cooking process, so why not? it ain't gonna hurt anything to do it. Now, one thing I am gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead, this shank end here, this open end, I'm gonna go ahead and put some seasoning on that. Again, it's open pores, and it may allow some flavor to get down under the skin and inside there, so why not? It ain't wasting if there's a potential that it can season it up. So got a nice little base layer of that. Again, this is my barbecue seasoning. It's back in being produced. It's I've had a few issues with it here recently, but bring this back. It'll be on the shelves hopefully here the next month or so. And it's just a typical pork barbecue seasoning. It's got a little sweet to it. It's got some turbinado sugar. And it's also got some paprika and a little bit of salt. A little bit of heat to it with some white pepper and some jalapeno powder. Nothing overpowering, but it's a good general barbecue seasoning. It does have some pepper in it. This fine grind of pepper, it mixes around and gets in your sinuses sometimes. Gets you into coughing a little bit. Now, this is where I'm talking about. I don't worry about over seasoning this big piece of meat here. There's way too much meat available to accept these flavors to worry about over seasoning. The only thing I consider over seasoning is when it's sitting here just running off of itself, when it's so coated that it's not even able to get down to the meat. I will sprinkle seasoning on until meat is completely covered. And try to get every square inch, every side, every angle. Again, now that back side, I'm not going to just spend a whole lot of time on it. I'm not going to neglect it and not put anything on there. But I do want to see seasoning everywhere. So there you have it. I've made a big old mess on the dining room table here. But now we've got a whole shoulder, the butt end and the picnic end left intact. It is it's going to sit up over the night in the refrigerator. Early in the morning, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the smoker. I'm going to open smoke it for probably 5 or 6 hours. A lot of people have said they pull at certain temperatures, and I'm a color guy. I like to pull it at color. I don't care what the internal temperature is. I know because it was frozen and it's going to maintain a cooler temperature being refrigerated. I'm going to pull it out of the fridge and try to let it sit out for 45 minutes to an hour. But if I do get this pork shoulder on a little bit cold, where it's not quite as warm as I normally would put it on the smoker, if I say I'm pulling at a certain temperature, if it goes on too cold, it's going to take a long time to get to that temperature. It may get darker than what I want it to do. But what I'm going to do is pull this when it starts, when I see these sugars and this seasoning start to turn dark. I don't mean just brown or mahogany that everyone really wants to see, but I'm going to pull this and wrap it in full right before it's to the point where I'd say it's too dark for my personal taste. Going in the full, being wrapped up tight, the juices and the fat's going to render, it's going to lighten that color a little bit as it's sitting in the full cooking, finishing cooking. So again, I'm going to pull it off the smoker when it's almost too dark for my taste, and knowing that it's going to lighten up just a little bit when it's sitting in that full. So probably, like I said, going to have an open smoke sitting on the smoker just like this for 5 or 6 hours, and then once it's wrapped in full, I'm going to put a probe in it, and if it takes 4 more hours, if it takes 6 more hours, however long it takes, we're going to find out. I'm going to cook this until it's got an internal temperature of around 200 degrees, 203, maybe even as high as 205. And what I think I'm going to do on this one, just to kind of learn a little bit more myself, I may put a probe in both ends, because I know from some of these pro shoulder teams and whole hog teams, your picnic end, because it is wrapped in this rind and it's a denser, less fatty meat, it cooks at a different temperature than this fatter Boston butt end. So we're going to kind of see how this comes together tomorrow. So like, share, subscribe. I'm sharing some of my butts, but like and share, subscribe please to the YouTube channel. The subscription doesn't get you buying anything or anything crazy like that, but it does give you updates when I put out these new videos. And this year 2019, I hope to be a lot more routine with the videos. Other than technical difficulties, I should be able to do at least a video every 2 weeks. So anyway, stay tuned. We're going to finish this up in the morning, get it on the smoker, and we will see how everything looks after a few hours of sleep in the refrigerator. Y'all come back.